Hello everyone. It is time for Introduction to the New Testament. During this 11th lecture on the Introduction of the New Testament, it is the fourth part of the miracles of Jesus. Today we'll talk about Lazarus. And as we have been searching into the miracles of Jesus in the introduction of the New Testament, the first miracle was in John chapter 2, at the wedding in Cana of Galilee, where the Lord had made water into wine. And through that we learned the lesson, and so we studied the lessons learned through that. And also to the second miracle of how Jesus healed a man with infirmity for 38 years, and how Jesus said, "I can do nothing," and learning of this Jesus. And then in John chapter 6, with the 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, Jesus fed the 5,000 people and had 12 basketfuls of leftover. Through this we spoke about how Jesus was the bread of life who had given life to the Israelites in the wilderness. And we had also spoken about manna. And so during this time we were going to talk about in John chapter 11 and how Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead and brought him back to life. And this story, we were going to study He who raises people from the dead. And He who resurrects people from the dead. This Jesus, that amazing power of Jesus. And today, inside of our hearts, the Lazarus who is dead in our hearts, that circumstance, when it meets Jesus, it comes to life again. And this subject is what we'd like to share in this 11th lecture here together. And during our time together, how has it been for you as we have been sharing this time in the introduction of the New Testament? And especially in the New Testament, the center of the New Testament is Jesus Christ. And all of the scriptures are writing about Jesus. Especially in the 4 Gospels. The 4 Gospels were named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew wrote about the image of Jesus who came as the King of the Jews. And Mark writes about Jesus who came to this earth as a servant, to serve man, and rather giving himself as the offering on the cross. And that's how Mark wrote about Jesus. Luke writes of Jesus, of how, although Jesus is perfectly God, at the same time, He is one who became flesh as we had, and that Jesus who is human, Jesus who is the Son of Man, that is what Luke wrote of. And the book of John writes about Jesus, who is God. Jesus who is God. And so these 4 Gospels, from different angles, they speak about Jesus. And in every single incident, and in each parable of Jesus, and in each of the works of Jesus, inside of this, it speaks about those things of Jesus. In one lecture, it is not enough to speak about all of this. Today, Lazarus, he was living here. So especially Mary and Martha, his younger sisters, who was living here, more than any family, they received a special love of Jesus. And Jesus, when they told him, "Your loved one is diseased," Jesus recognized that to be Lazarus. And so immediately, more than any family, there are people who received the special love of Jesus. But today, Lazarus, who had fallen ill, in the Bible, it does not pinpoint exactly what disease it is, but through that disease, he was dying little by little. So although he is their older brother, he was like a parent to Mary and Martha. And so the sickness of their older brother, Lazarus, brought them so much pain, suffering, and worry. So Mary and Martha, they thought, older brother, be stronger, be strong. Brother, you have to be strong, please. And as they said that, From this story, Mary and Martha truly had an insecure heart, and they wanted to send a person. And so they wanted to send a man and say, let's send a man quickly to bring Jesus over. If Jesus comes here, he can surely heal our older brother. If Jesus comes here, he can surely heal our brother from this disease. So Martha and Mary, they thought that when Jesus comes, our older brother will not die from this disease, and he will heal him of this disease. And with that heart, they sent someone to Jesus, and that person was sent by Mary and Martha. When he came to Jesus and told him about Lazarus, Jesus spake to that person. And Jesus said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. This disease is not a disease unto death. It is not a disease unto death. It is not a disease unto death, but it is for the glory of God. The glory of God. So whose words are these? These are the words of Jesus. When the person who was sent told Jesus about Lazarus, Jesus said, this sickness is not unto death. These are the words of Jesus. The words of Jesus. This is the word of Jesus. Jesus said, it is not a sickness unto death, it is for the glory of God. And upon hearing that, the person relayed those words unto Mary and Martha. And Mary and Martha thought, Jesus, why did he not come? When will Jesus come? Mary and Martha, Jesus said that your older brother will not die. Therefore, do not worry. Jesus said that he will soon be here. And so when they told this news to Mary and Martha, oh sister, we're okay. We'll be fine when Jesus gets here. Jesus said that this sickness is not unto death. Our brother will not die. Our brother will live. And through this, they said that we're going to glorify God. Now all we have to do is glorify God, right? Yes, Mary and Martha, they received these words. These words, they believed these words. Yes, they believed. And so they believed the words. And so Mary and Martha believed what Jesus said, that this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God. And change came to them. Now the worries of their heart and the concerns, the insecurity, the sadness, and from the sadness of their older brother dying, they had fallen into that. The worries and concerns and insecurity and sadness and worries. But however, the word says that this is a sickness not unto death, and when they heard the word, they had believed that word, then change would have come to their hearts. So the concerns, worries, and sadness and insecurity, from that they would have changed. And then what would have come into their hearts? Peace would have come to their hearts. If Jesus just comes here, we'll be okay. That hope. And they would have rest inside of their hearts. And therefore, older brother, don't worry. Older brother, you're going to live. You're not going to die. The person that I sent to Jesus came back and said that you will not die. So older brother, don't worry. And Martha, Mary, alright, thank you. Yes, I'm not going to die. Do not worry. That's right. Older brother, we're not going to worry at all. Jesus already said this. That's right. They heard the words of Jesus. And they received the words. They believed the words. And peace came to them. And their worries went away. And the rest came into their hearts. Until when? While their older brother was alive. And so it seemed that they believed. And so it seemed that they believed the words, but because their older brother was alive, they received the words. But when Lazarus died, Mary and Martha, what do they say? Surely the word said that this sickness was not unto death, and we accepted the word as reality. But in reality, how did their older brother change? Their older brother died. Lazarus died. Right then, what we need to search into then is, the word of Jesus said that this sickness was not unto death, and they believed those words when Lazarus was alive, and they believed it, and their hearts had changed. But the next day when they went there, their older brother was dead. Older brother! Older brother! And their older brother, with a cold body, they had a dead body that they could never turn back from. Mary was sad. And Mary also was in pain, and they were in true pain. Oh, older brother died. Older brother, speak to us. But their older brother could say nothing to them. And his body was only rotting, and his heart had stopped beating. He was no longer a person who belonged to this world. The words of Jesus said that this is not a sickness unto death. But in reality, when the older brother died, between the word and the reality, the words said that this is not a sickness unto death, but in reality is that he died, and with that Mary and Martha, if Mary had accepted the words, change would have come to her heart, and she would have peace in her heart. But that word, until when? While he was alive, she believed the word. But when he died, in reality, this is not a sickness unto death. And all of her thoughts that the brother would not die, all of that just disappeared. And so let us think about this. If Mary and Martha believed, what did they believe? Oh, older brother, don't worry, you will live. This is not a sickness unto death, but is a sickness that will glorify God. We believe this. And they did believe this. But then what did they believe? They believed. What is faith? They believed the word, but in front of reality, when he died, that faith broke in front of them. That is why when they had a funeral and buried their older brother. And so they put him into a cave. And they buried him, and they put a stone in the entrance. And then Jesus, 4 days after Lazarus died, that is when Jesus came. And upon hearing that Jesus was coming, Mary and Martha ran out to meet Jesus. And they held on to Jesus and said, Jesus, why are you here now? Older brother is dead. You should have been here earlier. This person, this Jesus who is with us right now, Jesus who is the Word who became flesh, He is really the Creator who created the world with His Word. Now this Jesus, wearing the flesh and came to this earth, and with His lips He said that this is not a sickness unto death. But Mary and Martha, they are the only ones who express this. But all the people who are in the world, rather than the Word, we accept the reality that has been before our own eyes. And that is why Jesus, even though Jesus gave us, but rather than the Word, the reality rules our hearts so much stronger. And that is why they buried Lazarus and placed Lazarus within the tomb. And then they blocked the cave with a stone. And then when Jesus came, Jesus, you should have come earlier, before He died, then He would have lived. But Jesus could save someone even from the dead. If He's the Word, He is able to create something from nothing. With the words, He can make the water into wine. With the Word, He fed 5,000 people with 5 barley loaves. And with the Word, He can even raise the dead. That is who Jesus is. But in the hearts of Mary and Martha, rather than the Word, inside of their life, they had lived by what they had experienced. And their many experiences and their knowledge and the reality was greater inside of them. And that is why ultimately, rather than the word, they accepted what was reality so quickly. If Mary and Martha precisely, this is not a sickness unto death, if they had believed these words, the next day in reality, suppose the older brother died. Right then, Mary and Martha, this is what they should say. Older sister, surely Jesus said this sickness is not unto death. This is for the glory of God. He said he will not die. But today, in our reality, this is death. Let's not believe this. Let's believe the Word. The older brother looks dead in our eyes, but in the eyes of the Word, it says that he is not dead. So our older brother is not dead. In our eyes, it appears that he is dead. In our eyes, and it seems that he is dead. But in the eyes of Jesus, in the Word, he is not dead. So let's not accept this. Jesus comes, and then Jesus says that he's dead, then maybe we can say he's dead. But he did not say that. Upon saying that, if Jesus comes and he says that he is dead, then he may be dead. But upon saying that, rather than reality, had the word taken place inside of them in faith, then their sadness and pain and worries and suffering should not have ruled their heart, and they would not have been able to bury their older brother in the tomb. And so they believed. And they believed until when? As long as their older brother was alive. So when is faith? Not when your older brother is alive. Even though your older brother seems this way in your eyes, faith is not giving your heart to the reality that you see, but to the reality that is connected to the Word of God. That's faith. That is why in John chapter 11, in this story, Jesus precisely speaks about these things in our hearts. Jesus came. So what Mary and Martha was thinking that in the eyes of Jesus, whether you come here 4 days after the death or whether you come here while he's alive, in our eyes, it's not a problem at all. But in the eyes of man, we say, Lazarus must not die. So wouldn't it be right if Jesus came before he died? So those kinds of thoughts of ours really have nothing to do with the Word of God. And it locks us within the thoughts of our flesh, and this is what Satan gives us, and we can precisely see that. And that is why Jesus said, your brother shall live. And Mary said, yes, on the last day of resurrection, on the last day he will live. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me should not perish. Though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? She said unto him, yes, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. Here, Mary and Martha, they say that they believe in Jesus, but they are not believing in Jesus. And so many people came to comfort them about the death of Lazarus, and they were sad together with each other. So Jesus came to the tomb where Lazarus was buried. And so the people at the tomb were all sad, and they were suffering. And Jesus also, he wept, and that's what it says. Oh, and Jesus was not sad because Lazarus is dead, or he is not sad because he cannot raise Lazarus from the dead, but Jesus is sad because there is not one person who allowed the word of Jesus to remain in their hearts. You try to kill me because you do not allow the word to remain in you. And Jesus said this many times. And Jesus said, this is not a sickness unto death, but for the glory of God. But in the people's hearts, they cannot accept these words at all. Remove the stone. Right then, Martha said, Lord, he's been dead for 4 days, and he stinks. And I smelled with my own nose the death of my older brother. Surely I checked that Lazarus was dead. I touched him. He was cold. He had no pulse. He had no heartbeat. The body was stiff. That's right. If you believe my words, didn't I tell you you will enjoy the glory of God? Remove the stone. Lord, he has been dead for 4 days. He stinks. Yes, today, just like Mary and Martha's heart, that which is dead, although they heard the word of God, the word is... And so Jesus said, remove the stone. That stone which is blocked Lazarus, move it away. Today, Mary and Martha's heart, that which is dead. Although they heard the word of God, the word is dead, and with the thoughts of humans covering that world of their heart, move it away. That is what he is saying. And therefore, they removed the stone. Right then, Jesus said, Lazarus, come forth. And he said it with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And people laughed. Oh, he's been dead for 4 days, and he stinks. He's been wrapped up with garments already. How can he come out? How can we get him out? How can he get up? How can he live? And so when Jesus said, Lazarus, come forth, it was such a short amount of time, but I'm sure the people must have laughed at Jesus. Lazarus, come forth. How can he hear that? He's dead. If he's dead, he can't hear what you're saying. But what? However, but what actually happened? Lazarus, he started walking out. And the people were completely shocked. He was walking out, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound with a napkin. And Jesus said unto them, Loose him. And then Jesus said unto them, Loose him. Loose all those things that are binding him right now. And they saw that Lazarus was alive. And then they all glorified God when they saw living Lazarus. Everyone, in this story of Lazarus, let's think about this a little more. There are lots of stories in the Bible that come out like this. Mary and Martha believed. When their older brother was alive. When their older brother died, they threw those words away. But those words were still alive, and it had the power of God. Yes. And that is why the words of Jesus that said, It is not a sickness unto death, but it is for the glory of God. Jesus said that. In the same way, being able to glorify God, that's who Lazarus became. And so, the humanistic thoughts that we have today, and from that until now, when the word and the reality was different, we threw the word away and accepted the reality like Mary and Martha. And we called Abraham the father of faith. Why does God call Abraham the father of faith? Even Abraham, he hoped against hope, and it says that is when he believed. God in the word of Abraham, next year about this time you will have a son. Now, even Sarah laughed at these words. Why? Because these words of God seemed like it could not be fulfilled at all. But God, as God gave Abraham the covenant of circumcision, so that now the males who are born after 8 days, they have to be circumcised. Doing circumcision cut away their flesh. Doing the circumcision that was given to them is stripping us away of our humanly thoughts. Our outwardly circumcision and inwardly circumcision, skinning the skin off of our hearts, believing that man's reality, and being held in the fixed thoughts of man, from that heart, removing that skin off the heart of ours, that circumcision of the heart. God wanted that, and Abraham performed the circumcision and believed in that fact, so Abraham hoped against hope and believed, and so shall your descendants be according to those words. And Abraham was able to believe in the word of God. And so God saw how Abraham believed in the word of God, and God called him righteousness. And so God saw how Abraham believed in the word of God, and God accounted him for righteousness. In the same way, in Romans chapter 4, it tells us that Abraham could not believe, but he believed hope against hope, and he believed. And today, through the church, we are born. Through Adam, we were born into sin, and we are people who could only live within sin. However, how is it that we could be righteous then? In Romans chapter 4 verse 5, and so it says, To him that worketh not, but believeth on him that justifieth the ungodly, his faith is counted for righteousness. But just as the woman taken in the act of adultery, just as the woman at the well, just as the man with the infirmity for 38 years, just like a thief at the cross, though we did not work and we could not work, and though we did not do any work, and we're not even godly, but God, He calls us righteous. When Jesus said, "This is not a sickness unto death" for Lazarus, but when he died, in reality, Mary and Martha fell into the circumstances of that reality. Faith is not falling into reality, but moving towards the Word of God. When you look at yourself, you're sinners. And when you look at yourself, you cannot become holy. We have only blemishes. How could I be righteous? Even though God sees us to be righteous, how could I ever be righteous? Even though God sees us to be righteous, we have to boldly say that we're sinners. How can I say that I'm righteous? No, but what do people think? What does the Word of God say? How they look at themselves is much greater. So, although we have the Word that calls us righteous, but when we compare ourselves with the Word, and in their own image, they accept the image of themselves rather than when they accept the Word. And that is why we have to labor. And that is why we have to work hard. And that is why we have to become righteous. And that is why we think the way that we have to do well in our... And that is why we think that we have to do well in our hearts. Everyone, our hearts fall into so many things. Our hearts fall into that so many times. Everyone, believe in the Word of God. And if that Word today calls us righteous, then we are righteous. If it calls us holy, then we are holy. But the Word of God that calls us holy, and my circumstances and my reality, when you compare it to yourselves, and when it is different than the Word of God, but rather than moving towards the Word, we move ourselves towards the circumstances. That's like Mary and Martha. That is the spiritual life that they had done. But Jesus said, "I am the resurrection, I am the life." Jesus said that I am the resurrection. That's right. Death cannot defeat our Jesus. The Word of Jesus is God. The Word is God. The Word has the power of resurrection. And if Jesus said this is not a sickness unto death, even though He appears to be dead, He's alive. He comes back to life. Jesus said He is the resurrection. The Word says that He is resurrected. Ultimately, everything of the Word gives you resurrection from all circumstances. It resurrects us from poverty. It resurrects us from disease. It resurrects us from sin. It resurrects us from shame. And from all other things, Jesus is the one who newly resurrects us. That is what we know. Today, just like we talked about in John chapter 11, Jesus said, "Remove the stone." We who are listening to this lecture, everyone, in front of many things, he who has the heart of Mary and Martha, just like the stone door of our hearts are closing our hearts, even our hearts, the stone that is closing our hearts in front of God, let us think about what that is. And through this Mahanaim Cyber lecture, although you listen to these words, let these words within you, and from your heart that is closed, let it remove the stone of your heart, and so that the Word may enter into your heart as well, and so that it may resurrect you who are dead, and resurrect us from the thoughts that are not going to work, resurrect us from the thoughts that it is too difficult. And so Jesus said, "I am the resurrection." So wherever the Word of Jesus reaches, wherever the Word of God comes into contact, there is the works of resurrection. There is the works of in our life. There's the works of life. In our hearts, we are filled with sin, but as the Word of Jesus collided against us, from that it gave us resurrection. And through that we are made righteous. And that Word of God, that Word of Jesus today, He says, "I am the resurrection." As we think about these words, one more time, inside of your hearts, inside of all of your hearts, I hope that you will experience Jesus who resurrects and experience that power. And this will end the lecture number 11. I will see you next time. Until then, please take care.